I think people just make this jump though when I give those talks, especially the Recon one. They're like, "Oh, Recon's gonna find me bugs," and that's where it falls apart, right? Like Recon doesn't really find you bugs.
Preach, Jason.
Yeah,
Here we
like
go.
so I use Recon and I give all these esoteric methods of Recon, and I make a whole talk about Recon to find more apps to hack.
Okay, so Jason, let me start us off with this, okay? I think you're one of the first role models that I had in the bug bounty world, to be perfectly honest, man. Like, I remember, I don't know why this memory is so, like, strong for me, but I remember sitting on the floor in my room when I had just moved, and I was like, dude, I think I got to do this bug bounty thing. And just, searching and finding your video, I think it was one of your level up videos with BugCrowd, and, the bug bounty hunting methodology, videos. And I just sat there and I just watched it like 4 times on repeat. And I was like, I'm going to have mastery of every single one of these things. So I don't know. It's just one of my first memories that I had with it. So I'm really grateful to have you on the show.
Thanks, man. It means a lot to me. It really does. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I'll echo a similar thought as well. I mean, you were definitely one of the first like major resources that I looked up in bug bounty for like how to start hacking and like what to even like do when it comes to like hacking and how to find bugs and all that kind of stuff.
That's so awesome. When you get older in the game, younger guys like yourself who come along who are just like so much better than me, honestly, saying that they took inspiration from you feels great. So I'm glad I'm doing something positive. So
yeah, for sure, man. And yeah, absolutely inspiration. And so I had a couple things here. I want to give you an opportunity to do your own introduction. But I also wanted to give a little introduction myself. First time ever doing an introduction on a podcast like this. So Jason Haddix, if you guys haven't heard of him, you're doing something wrong. OG hacker, really shares some amazing content for bug bounty hunting methodology in particular. I guess when I think of you, Jason, a couple things pop into my mind. First of all, you have street cred in the industry, right? Like you were #1 hacker on BugCrowd for a while. Like you're in the weeds doing the hacking, and even to this day still doing the hacking. But now you've pivoted a little bit into you're a CISO now, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So this is kind of where I see 2 paths in the future for Justin, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can go sort of the Franz Rosen path, the entrepreneur, like he's out there, he has like 3 companies or something like that.
Yeah.
Or I can go the Jason Haddix path of like, all right, I want to be C-suite, I want to be, helping manage a cybersecurity program from a top level. So you've pulled that off. And the other things that just kind of come to my head, we've already talked about what kind of a great educator you are, but also another role model piece for me is just a part of your online persona and something that you are very public about is, being a great dad. And I think it's really refreshing to see that sort of prioritization in industry. And even when we were scheduling this podcast, you were like, hey, I can come on, but actually I've got to spend some time with my family. And I've got that blocked off from here to here. And I was just like, man, this guy's the shit. So, yeah.
Just when we thought we couldn't like him anymore.
Yes.
He's a family man, too.
Yeah. It's great, man. So,
Thanks so much.
Yeah, with that, why don't you give us a little bit of a self-intro yourself? And
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, Jason Haddix. I've been in the offensive security scene, I would say, for probably about 15 years. So really, I got started, shortly after the Loft era, where we started to see more consultancies doing penetration testing as kind of the main thing, and DAS scanners were just starting to come out and stuff like that. And so, really, I was in college. I did a Darknet Diaries story of kind of like my story, but I was in college and I was mostly on the underground scene back when Shadow Crew was a thing. It was a big underground forum before the dark web was really the dark web. And I was learning hacking there. I was originally just making fake credit cards, or not fake credit cards. Sorry, fake IDs. Fake IDs. Yeah.
I was like, damn, Jason.
No. Sorry.
Credit cards?
Fake IDs. Sorry, pre-coffee.
Yeah.
But I was making fake IDs, and just for me and my friends. And then part of that forum ecosystem is like the people who use the fake IDs for the carding, and the other part of that forum, underground kind of lifestyle is the people who provide the dumps, which is the credit card numbers, and those are the hackers really. And so, I was starting to get some exposure to hacking there. And then I took an elective at my college, which was a junior college, and it was called Ethical Hacking and Network Defense. It was just one class.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was old already by the time it was out. It was like super old. They were talking about like back orifice and stuff like that. But I was talking to my teacher, and he's like, "Yeah, you can make money, being a professional like hacker." And I was like, "That is exactly what I want to do. Like that sounds amazing." And so I just kind of threw myself into it from like my early 20s into everything. So back then it was a lot of NetPen, service exploitation with like generic, buffer overflows. Web was really starting to take off. Like SQL injection and Rainforest Puppy were, we're just starting
to take off.
Yes, yeah, exactly, yeah. Anyway, so I did that. I went on to a small consultancy. And then eventually, after that, I landed at HP, working with a really great team at HP. Nice. And we built a small little startup inside of HP called Shadow Labs, which was a testing team. And it was one of the best experiences of my life, worked with some great people.
Dude.
And we did a lot of cutting-edge mobile research before iOS pivoted to Swift. We were, back on the Objective-C train. And tons of mobile research there. I built a binary analysis tool there, did a whole bunch of web penetration testing, and then left because BugCrowd was around. And so I knew Casey from the industry, and he was like, "Yo, I'm starting this thing. I'm really only doing it via email right now." There was no platform. Literally, they just emailed you a program and a scope. And they were like, and I think they used like SurveyMonkey or something to run the whole thing. It was crazy. And so he's like, I'm literally just going to.
So give me some context on this. What year was this?
Oh, jeez.
I know. I hate asking that question to people because if somebody.
Let me go back. Hold
on.
So you guys asked me to bring some. You asked me to bring some bugs. Let me just go back to my submission timeline.
Yeah, for sure. Do that. And I'm interested because you said you knew Casey from the industry. And then it's really cool that you were like one of these first people interacting with BugCrowd as they were starting to. I mean, it really seems like they were almost in like minimum viable product phase back then.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. They were. I mean, it was Jay Cran and Casey and like I think 5 other people.
Wow, no
way. They had just moved into an office in San Francisco, all crammed in like a garage office somewhere, and so they were managing everything via SurveyMonkey. So your bug submissions would be to like a SurveyMonkey URL, and then they'd be handled like support tickets for like a support place. And then they would just send you an email, and they're like, and this is back in the day of time boxed. So like it would be like 48 hours. This program's going to be open. 48 hours. Program's going to be open. Here's the scope. And first come, first serve until so much money was exhausted, and that was the old format of most of the bounties. And so
we still see that a little bit. I think they mostly do that when they're onboarding new programs and stuff like that nowadays too. So.
Yeah. The exhausting the money thing doesn't happen as much nowadays, but sometimes it still does on the private ones. So. Jesus Christ. Okay, so this is more than 10 years ago because I'm having to scroll all the way down.
Way.
Yeah, it's crazy. God. Yeah. Let's see here. What was the first one?
I mean, you could probably count on 2 hands, maybe one hand.
Yeah.
The number of people that have bugs going back 10 years.
For sure, hold on. That's crazy.
Yeah. So so I started doing BugCrowd during the nights when I was doing pen testing during the day for HP.
Sure.
And really the guy who really made me obsessive with it was Bitquark. He's another really great hacker in the scene. And so we were neck and neck in the leaderboard for like a year, basically, up and down and up and down. And honestly, he's one of the best hackers in the world if you ever meet this guy. Bitquark a great guy. I've met him at DEF CON, and he likes to keep his privacy, but he was very, very technical. And but we battled for like a year on the leaderboard when BugCrowd, even first launched. Yeah, so exactly 10 years. The first one I participated in was 10 years ago. My first bounty. You guys want to know what my first bounty was?
Hit us with it.
You guys are gonna laugh. All right, $100 and 5 points for missing HTTP cookie flag.
No, Jason, no.
I know, right?
No.
I know.
That's a pretty serious issue.
I know, dude. I know. It's my first big one was a web application firewall bypass.
Oh, nice.
So that one was, I think it was a WordPress WAF that they had implemented, and you could add a header that basically said gave it like an address of 127.0.0.1, and it wouldn't apply checks to you anymore.
Nice.
That's awesome.
That's crazy though, because I guess at that time the standards were kind of still being established for what exactly bug bounty was morphing into, and now
exactly.
In this modern day era, era, we're kind of in this place of like POC or GTFO.
Yeah, exactly.
And, have very exploitable bugs, but in the beginning, it was the closest thing to it was a pen test.
Exactly.
And so, why wouldn't you report HTTP?
I mean, I was reporting. I mean, that's something I learned right away, right? The bug bounty, it morphed pretty quickly to hey, the stuff you're going to report as information on a pen test should really not be reported to a bug bounty. It's it's not something they really care about, or they've seen it before or whatever. But back in the day, honestly, even some people were not talking about cookie security, right? Or or header security. And so this was pretty cutting edge 10 years ago.
Yeah,
so people were like, oh yeah, I can mitigate, certain portions of CSRF and cross-site request forgery if I just set this cookie. And I was like, well, why don't I report it, right? If they want to take it, they'll take it. And if they don't want to take it, they won't. And so some, I continue to do this for months. And some people did, and some people were like, nah, that's cool. And a lot of my bigger bugs, in the years following were obviously like SQL injection and stuff like that if I'm scrolling up here. But
yeah, dude, I don't know why, but I cannot find SQL injection. I've found, I've been doing this full time for 3 years. I've been hacking, 6 years, so real experienced over here. But I found maybe it's just one of those bugs that always gets past me. I've found 5 or 6 SQL injections in so that's one a year for my whole career. And I don't know. Maybe it's the targets, maybe it's my testing methodology, but whenever anybody says, yeah, one of my main bugs is SQL injections, I'm like, really? Are you sure?
Oh yeah. It was more prevalent back then for sure.
Oh,
I feel like SQL injections almost solved, I think, at this point. And I think there's also this thing that people don't talk about is there are generations of hackers now, right? So there are people who've grown up with cloud first and newer languages and frameworks that, these bugs are all but extinct in this new stuff. But when you get on a program that's legacy, man, I wreck those programs because I grew up in those technologies, right? Like Java and stuff like that. And they still have SQL injection all over the place because no one's audited that code in 8 million years, especially if it's closed source. So
right.
I mean, it is funny because when I get on when I know a program is based on an older technology or framework or is a legacy company, which many of the bigger companies in the world are still carrying legacy technology. You still find some of that kind of stuff. So
yeah, for sure. I know who to ping now when I get a cool private invite of an old legacy program.
Yeah. So I worked at BugCrowd, battled it out for leaderboard spot number 1. I think that was in 2016 and 2017, and maybe a little bit of 2018. And then Bug Bounty blew up, and I went to work for BugCrowd because I want to be involved in it. And
did you just hit Casey up and be like, hey man, I'm loving this, or did they hit you up, or how did that go?
So I met him at DEF CON. They flew me out for being the #1 researcher, and I got to meet Franz and Anshuman and some other really cool people for the first time, Bitquark, and I was like, yeah, I want to be involved in this. So I told Casey, I'm like, how can I work for you guys? And they needed a head of the triage team, basically, a head of operations. And I was like, yeah, I could do that. I mean, it wasn't too unsimilar from managing a pen test team, honestly. And I wanted
so,
to build like a world-class triage team.
They say that to you, right? They say, hey, we need a head of triage.
Yeah.
What's going through your head at this point? Because so you're currently employed or no? Or
I'm employed.
Full-time? You are.
Yeah, I'm employed.
Okay,
yeah.
so you're doing bug bounty on the side.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, what kind of money you were making at the time, but when I was employed and I was doing bug bounty, there was a point where my bug bounty income surpassed my main income, right? And I was like, okay, I need to go, full-time bug bounty because there's no reason for me to be doing this. But if I were to have HackerOne or BugCrowd or any of these programs or these platforms reach out to me and say, hey, Justin, we want you to come do XYZ, but you can't hack.
Yeah, that was part of the agreement.
Hard call.
Yeah. So they basically the rule. I mean, there wasn't hard and soft policies back then, but the rule once I came on, I was the first kind of tester that they had, running an operations team, and so any program I had access to, I wasn't allowed to hack on, which was a lot of programs because we hadn't built out a just-in-time access system back then. It was like, you would get invites and it was like, oh crap, I have, because I'm in a marketing role and an operations role and I'm talking to these customers all the time, so I guess that means I can't hack on these things. So it really did stop my hunting for like a year and a half until they came out, with some stuff and some new policies, and then I could get back to hacking. But, that's the thing that a lot of people don't talk about, honestly, is that, people like us who have full-time security jobs and are bug bounty hunting also take moonlight work. And my moonlight pen test work was able to keep me through, just doing side pen tests for people, was able to replace that bounty kind of money.
That makes sense. I mean, I guess maybe I should hit Casey up and ask him this question, but I feel like it's a little bit of an odd move as a startup to take your top hacker and then employ him and then say, now you can't hack. I don't know. I feel like that's a little bit of a weird move because at that point they still need to sell their product. And for them, you are one of the main selling points. I mean, you pretty much I would imagine at that point, some high percentage of the bugs being submitted are you. And so they kind of cut that contributions to the platform out when they employed you, and obviously they gained a lot of other benefits and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's what do you think about that decision? Did that slow them down at all, or?
My final position at HP before I left was Director of Penetration Testing at HP, which was a giant role and carried with it a lot of clout because I think the only Director of Penetration Testing in the world was Dan Kaminsky at that time at IOActive.
Wow.
And so...
some OG shit here.
Yeah.
I'm fanboying a little bit here.
And so they definitely gained more than they lost, right?
Yeah.
Because I am really good at, basically marketing and sales and all this other stuff that, I think for many, many years, it was like, oh, Jason Haddix is involved in BugCrowd. Let's go check them out and see what they're about. And I know the triage team, he's leading that, so it must be really good. And so I think it far outweighed, my bug hunting contributions to the platform. Honestly.
So you had enough of a clout in the community at that point to be able to transition, over to BugCrowd and then, use that position to help BugCrowd sort of sell the product and get in it very. That makes sense. All right, Casey. All right. I didn't mean to call you out, Casey. I knew you knew what you were doing. But
no, Casey's actually so brilliant. I mean, he's not front and center in a lot of stuff, but he's one of the smartest entrepreneurs I've ever met, honestly. And I would work with him again in a second at a new venture if anything ever happened. But Casey's my bro. So anyway, so I worked at BugCrowd for 5 years, and then I went through a number of roles. I went through the operations, director of operations, and then to head of trust and security, which is a hybrid security role. And then our sales engineering leader left. And then I stepped in to basically run sales engineering, which I stayed in for a year and a half because I was really good at it. And then I left that role to go to researcher success, and I was head of researcher enablement, basically, which was to basically grow kind of the number of good hackers on BugCrowd. and to compete with kind of the marketing spend that HackerOne spends on like really pushing the hacker faces out there. We wanted to, do the same stuff. And so created the ambassador program, created the free education, helped create Level Up, pushed our conference and marketing kind of agenda, our open source tools, all of that. I was doing all of that.
That's kind of the position I remember you from, that's my intro to you was at that point.
Yeah. So at what point did you start, like, had you already started working on the bug bounty, like, hackers, like, methodology at that point, or?
Yeah. I did the first version of what I would call the bug hunters methodology talk at DEF CON 16, I think. And
wow.
And it was, back then it was called How to Shot Web.
And it was, I saw that.
Yeah. And so it was in DEF CON 101 tracks, and it was not as refined as it is now, but I mean, back then a lot of people weren't really talking about Recon and even really in-depth kind of web things that we take for granted now, right? So like kind of new school frameworks, polyglot payloads, file upload vulnerabilities were still everywhere, and so I just started talking to friends and parsing like every blog I could and just put it into this presentation that I was like, hey, if you're a web tester, maybe you'll find something useful in this giant dump of information. and people really, really, really responded to it. I got hundreds of messages and like, that's the best web presentation I've seen all year. And I was like, all right, cool. So maybe I'll just do this every year, and I'll talk about bug classes and tools that save time for pen testers and bug hunters. And that's kind of what the talk morphed into. And so that's when I started that talk.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that's just such a legendary piece. And when you said How to Shot Web, I just got flooded by nostalgia because I definitely went back and looked into that, and so that was really cool.
Yeah. So I left BugCrowd, went on to Ubisoft as the CISO. Wanted to try my hand at like the big org CISO role, and that was a lot of fun. I did a lot of really great work there with some tremendous people. Lived through, working 3 years at Ubisoft was like working 10 years at any other company, because it was giant. It was 22,000 people.
Oh my gosh.
The thing is that we were one central security group managing all of those people who are primarily devs. It was still hybrid legacy. So a lot of security issues to take care of, a lot of security programs to run. And then honestly, the hardest thing about the gaming industry is that each game in and of itself is like a product team. And so if you can imagine having one company with 60 products and you have to secure them, it is insane. And you learn so much because they're not standardized. They're each their own tech stack, infrastructure. Some people were building their own stuff. Some people are using cloud. And it's like, okay, so you're a group of 50 to 100 people, but you have 60 products to secure. It's amazingly
That's
drinking
nuts,
from the
man.
fire hose. Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow. Yeah. That I couldn't even imagine. That level of dealing with that many employees and that many products.
It was nuts. So I did that. I enjoyed it, but then I left, and now I am at a place called Butterbot.
Okay, tell me a bit about that. And actually, that's headquartered in Virginia, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Where are you at currently?
I'm in Colorado.
Okay. Oh yeah. That's right. That's right. You're in Colorado.
Yeah.
Dude. Virginia welcomes you, man. If
okay.
you
all right.
Get over here. I'm trying to sell Joel on moving over here. It might be in the works.
It's a nice place. I like it a lot. So,
good stuff.
I mean, we moved to Colorado just because we needed bigger space for the fam, right? We wanted every kid to have a room, and I wanted a basement that was kind of sound isolated to do stuff like this. So, that's nice. We chose Colorado, but so Butterbot. Like I said, I lived through my moonlighting sometimes, and made extra income, and I always moonlighted with this company called Butterbot with a friend of mine, Luke, who built this company.
Oh, nice.
And he's been doing this for 10 years, but on the DoD side. So DoD pen test, DoD security contracting, has a really great relationship with a lot of the three-letter agencies, and so I would come on and do these tests for him. And then, off board, and we always really work together. And so this last year, he was like, "Hey, do you want to come and really push this thing into the regular enterprises of the world, and build out, like kind of a little bit of a regression, but also like a way forward in security testing. I was like, yeah, so I'll come and lead it. So so I am now the CISO of Butterbot, but really I'm doing everything. It's we're about on this side we're about 15 to 20 people.
Okay.
And so we're doing full scope adversary emulation. So one thing I learned at Ubisoft with the Lapsus incident that happened and just like living in that world, talking to CISO friends, is that there's a giant disconnect between bug bounty and penetration testing, and what actually causes an incident at a company. And so adversaries, like, yeah, they do take advantage of application infrastructure bugs, but more often than not, they're using phishing, they're using configuration, like, bugs.
Or that they're using bugs that you haven't turned off.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But actually one of the biggest ones is just like they're not even doing the work themselves all the time, right? So like they're going to darknet markets and picking up credentials and doing credential stuffing and using them in novel ways. And the more and more I talked to CISOs last year, I was like, yeah, I mean, there's a couple red team companies that do full scope stuff like this, but there's not many. And I really think that, from seeing everything at my time at Ubisoft, that someone needs to offer a full scope service. So what we do at Butterbot is we do like a year-long, we call it continuous adversary emulation. It's a year-long service. Okay. So we scope the project, do recon up front for the external. We do a year of testing, basically for you.
And that's like, I mean, is that the go-to product, or is that the minimum product, or like?
That's the premium product, yeah.
Okay, that's the premium product. Okay, yeah. So that's what you're trying to,
Yeah.
You may, people say, hey, I can't handle, a year of testing budget-wise, then you kind of scale it off. But that's the product that you're trying to get out there.
Yeah, I mean, the general narrative is basically that, like hackers don't really take a break, right? And it's why a lot of people pivot to bug bounty, right? A lot of the times. But so we're offering advanced social engineering with it. We're going to the dark web. We're pulling creds off of things like Genesis Market and stuff like that. Wow. So we bake in a whole bunch of threat intelligence. We also do attack surface management. So I basically took everything that I thought, what are real adversaries doing these days to get in from the external, and how can I turn that into a service? And then I also took kind of my 15 years of internal penetration testing and red teaming. And so we do about 8 externals over the course of 12 months and 2 internals. And we turn it into this service called continuous adversary emulation. And then we bake in some stuff at the end too to do atomic red team testing. And I was just like, hey, if you were a mid-sized company and you couldn't afford a red team like Google has, right? Yeah. What would be the package that you would want to really figure out if you could be breached? And we built that into a service. So that's kind of where we are now.
That's crazy. That sounds like such a valuable product to the customer. Like that and I think it's so awesome that you're a part of crafting that too, because you have such an eclectic experience. You started in IT, then you moved into pen testing, so you got the internal external pen testing side. You've done bug bounty, which is just outside POC or GTFO. You've been a CISO, so you've seen all the attacks, the CISO of a breached company, so you can see all the attacks and the attack vectors. And then you take all that experience, roll it up into one service, and give it to the medium-sized companies that can't afford their own red team.
Yep, exactly. And it's usually for the price of what you would spend on one red team or two. So it's pretty affordable.
Dude,
but
it's times like this when I hear about this product that I'm like, why am I doing bug bounty? I love bug bounty. I absolutely love it. Every day that I do it, I get in there and I'm like hackety, and it's like I just love it. But then I hear about stuff like this, and I'm like, wow, that is so... And don't get me wrong, bug bounty has a lot of value add to companies, and I totally believe in the product.
Yeah.
But when I hear about stuff like this, and my entrepreneurial side just starts going, and like my just give amazing value to companies side starts going, and it just it gets me hyped, man.
Yeah, so one of the things that we add into... we call it CAE or whatever, but is actually... we're looking for a better name, but we call it the Ringer. And the Ringer is bringing in one of you guys twice a year. So my team of engineers will do our best, and we will do a lot of recon up front to figure out the technologies, whether they're SaaS or infrastructure or whatever. And then as part of the built-in cost for the year-long service, we bring in 2 specialized bug bounty hunters to work with us on our Butterbot team for 3 weeks. And we pay them upfront. It's not pay for effort. So yeah.
Call me.
Yeah. And so I'm building a small stable of people I really trust who are world-class engineers who can come on and just be those extra eyes and who I know are specialists in technology. And I know bug bounty hunters have been asking for this, for a long time, right? I mean, HackerOne and BugCrowd have their crowdsourced pen tests, but this is a lot of fun. And I'm really only inviting people I know who are super legit. And I've got Brett on speed dial for some stuff, and and ZLZ, and I'm obviously thinking about you guys, but bounty hunters are getting tired of the waste on my time and not get paid and get dicked around by the platform, kind of thing. And we're going to give it back to the bug bounty hunters and let them get paid for their effort and work with a cool team and be an extension of our team here, because I know the power of that. And so, bug bounty platforms, look out! I'm coming for you. That's all I gotta say.
Oh, so. Jason, dang, all right. No, I feel it though, and I think there definitely is. I mean, in a lot of ways, the attack surface is getting harder, and in a lot of ways, it's getting easier. And there's a trade-off. A lot more companies are getting into bug bounty, so there's a lot more places to hack and a lot more things to go after. But as we evolve, the bug classes are sort of disappearing. XSSI I loved XSSI, and that's gone now. And CSRF is still possible, but it's definitely a struggle now. And so as we see these attack surfaces sort of shoring up a little bit, we have to pivot. And I think another big thing that would be really helpful for bug bounty hunters, or especially people that want to do solo entrepreneur stuff, is have this thing with Jason where you go and you do your moonlighting and you do some pen test work, and that assures you're going to make your however much you need
your
to make
base or whatever
to make sure you're paying your bills and feeding your family and that sort of thing. And then you get to spend your time, you get your freedom, you get your to be your own boss, and you can go after whatever other targets you find interesting in the bug bounty space and do whatever research you want to do, which is where I find a lot of value in being a full-time bug bounty hunter.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were really hyped because the bug bounty hunters are really good in the externals, but a lot of bug bounty hunters don't get a lot of internal work. So the Active Directory type of exploitation.
I miss that, man.
And
I really miss it.
We do 2 of those, in the package a year. Or if we can pivot from external to internal, we find a bug that lets us do that. Obviously, we start doing that type of work, and we do 2 types. And so, being able to work with some of the bug bounty hunters on getting back into that skill set, they're just oh, this is refreshing. I get to do this kind of stuff, and it's pretty cool. So yeah,
it absolutely is. All right. So that's the intro for you, Joel. Where do you want to go from here,
dude? I have you have such a really diverse, full background. It's really, really interesting to hear.
Yeah.
I think I definitely relate with a lot of the types of experiences that you've been through, going from hacker side to corporate side, and I'm very much so on the corporate side currently. And it's just very interesting to hear you talk about sort of a lot of the things that everybody within corporate security sort of talks about, where it's bug bounty is a thing that exists, but it's not a one size fits all solution, and it doesn't solve all the problems. It solves a select portion of the problems, and it doesn't create a security team. It doesn't create a culture of security within a company or
Joel,
anything.
Are you
like
trying
that.
to tell me that I the bug bounty hunter, am not the end all be all? What are you talking about?
Not to invalidate you too much, Justin, but yeah. So no, it's really cool to hear that you've taken all that experience and stuff and turned it into something that you can help provide to companies. I was curious, is the only thing that Butterbot provides, is it purely sort of that testing side, or do you also provide almost application security as a service, or that type of guidance towards how to build better security teams and all that kind of stuff?
So one of the things that I'm really, really good at, and it's not really a bug bounty skill, but is offboarding and onboarding customers. Because at BugCrowd I worked with probably over 250 programs, and then at HP I worked with the majority of the Fortune 100, and so some of my best friends are vCISOs, which jump in and out of companies all the time. So I have a very good pulse on how to help them build a security program. So in the reporting, and this is a new company, right? So we're still building out how this works. But in the offboarding, a whole month is dedicated with the head of the security program, the SOC, whatever their team structure is like, right? If it's IT or whatever, on building the right security program with the focus of to not get breached, basically, right? Like, I really appreciate application security and product security and all the other portions of security and security programs and stuff like that. But really, like, the point of the service is like, can you get breached, right? Like, because that's the nightmare for the CISO is like getting wrecked. And I've had that nightmare, so I know. Yeah. That's the point of it. It's mostly testing, but at the end we offer like a month of kind of offboarding, and it includes some security. And like I said, we include things like if we have a successful attack path, we're going to do atomic red team and atomic purple team tests.
What does that mean? What is atomic red team, atomic purple team?
So you can think of the MITRE attack framework, which is a lot of what pen testers and red teamers use these days to describe micro pieces of their methodology on how they basically achieve their objectives. And the way they do it is they take real threat actors and they break down their methodologies into tiny little TTPs, basically. And MITRE attack maps out all those types and individual tests. And so basically, atomic red team tests are small little bite-sized code pieces, a lot of times in PowerShell, but sometimes in other technologies, that'll allow you to replay one tiny little portion of attack to see if your SOC can recognize it or train them on recognizing it.
Okay, so it's training the blue team to see various attacks while they're happening.
Exactly, yeah. Nice. And so, so you sit with them and you're like, hey, I'm going to push the button right now. Do you see it in Splunk? And they're like, yeah, I saw it. Like, okay, let's build that alert and let's prioritize it correctly. And, how do you scale that across a 22,000 person business? And so you kind of build out parts of their defensive nature. But will we be fixing code level vulnerabilities? Probably not. I want to give my customers the best I can, but I'm probably not going to consult with them and, fix app level code bugs. I'll give them as much advice as I can, but yeah, that's kind of where we'll be at. So
I'd imagine, and Joel, you can probably shed some more light on this, but I'd imagine that, bringing in a third party to actually modify your code base and stuff like that, I feel like that it's a little bit, because you got to kind of know the context of the application, and then you've got all this, learning friction that you've got. If you're bringing on a third party to actually fix the code base. So, I mean, do you see that, Joel? I mean,
yeah, I mean, I've had discussions about this with some of our mutual friends about does it make sense to think about starting like a company that's basically AppSec as a service or PodSec as a service? And the conclusion I came to is not really, because an AppSec team needs to be bespoke. It needs to be highly integrated. It needs to be well versed with the engineering team and what they're doing and what the infrastructure looks like and what the systems look like and what means sensitive to that company. And you can contract that out to some extent, but actually building a full-fledged security team that has trust with the engineers and can make actual improvements throughout the whole ecosystem is really difficult from an outside perspective.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to show my true red team side here, and having done maybe a year of dev work, but outside of that, none. So the security teams at these organizations, I'll throw this to both of you, but I want to hear from Joel first here, and then go over to Jason because he's got a wider variety of experience. Does the security team actually have can you go in there and modify code, or do you have to be like, devs, please change this, please, how does that work?
So at least where I work, no, it's all you would have to request write access to those repos to be able to write, and even still the most you could do is probably open a pull request. You couldn't actually make changes on main or anything like that. And I think that's definitely for the better. Obviously, I don't think you really want your application security team to be pulling into that space and trying to become the engineers, right? Because that's not really what their specialty is. Yeah, we could make code changes that would probably be valid, but that also means we have to learn this repo and the syntaxes and all the different coding, whatever, documentation and best practices that they follow within that team or that repo or whatever. And we could try and replicate that, but the amount of time it would take for us to do that versus saying, here's what you should do, and let the engineer who knows what they're doing go ahead and take that. We've always found that it's easier to just guide and then just Solid. Verify, right?
Jason, do you see that same thing?
I mean, so if you break it into two, is there opportunity for a consultancy to do that? Usually not. I've had a couple friends who have tried to bake it in, and like onboard as longer term projects and bake in application security, but there is always a culture clash of being a consultant. And so it usually doesn't work like that, but there's some examples that are, like positive, at least that I can think of. But as far as internally and the way you structure your security team, so one of the things I was really successful at, and I got this advice from a security leader friend of mine, Tony, who used to be at Tinder. But Tony was like, the best thing I ever do was create a central security engineering organization. And so that's what I did at Ubisoft. Is one of the four big branches of our security team was this kind of pick up the bat phone. This is a priority application. Bring on 4 or 5 AppSec engineers, and they would onboard with you for 6 months at a time, and basically be part of your team. And they got billed to your team, and so they would sit with you. They would go to stand-ups. They're part of the all of the dev infrastructure and everything like that. And then they would start fixing vulnerabilities themselves after a little while. And then we would have to do that by priority because we had 60 products. But eventually we started burning down really big systemic issues. And then we could move on to categories of non-systemic issues that were priority, and then to medium priority. And so we had this like strike team that we could apply, and it was, it became very, very, very successful inside of Ubisoft. And so I think that whole org was broken up into security engineering was broken up into security architects, which helped design systematic fixes, basically. Which we had 2 cloud architects on different technologies. We had kind of our legacy technologies guy. We had a guy who knew the network really well and like the topology. We had an API guy, and then we had a couple guys who were just devs in the coding languages of whatever that we most of our productions used. And then we had a consultant team who were trainers and threat modelers, and they would onboard with products, and then we had a couple other just people on the team, but I think it was a total team of maybe 15, and they helped a lot of people in that model. 22,000. Yeah. Like that. Yeah, but I mean, it can make a big impact, honestly. So so they onboarded and were really successful, and I like that strike team type of mentality. If you have the budget for it inside of an organization.
Very cool.
So would you say that there are any major key takeaways that you still pull on on a day-to-day basis from your hacker experience going into a C-suite experience, and then also from your previous running a security team to now being head of security?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a ton of valuable lessons. In fact, I get myself in trouble a lot because I call a lot of CISOs haha CISOs or business CISOs at conferences and stuff, because they've never actually done security. I mean, they'll come from risk management, or they'll come from, some have come from marketing or something like that. It's these are executives, and having the executive skill set and being able to present to the board and speak well is absolutely a key feature you need, to be in this role. But I believe the future lies with technical CISOs, people who understand at least a medium level what the attacks are, and you use that to guide your security program. So I was on a panel a couple weeks ago here in Denver with 2 guys who were very eloquent. They dressed very nicely. I'm in my hoodie up there on stage, and they're talking about all these security programs, and I'm like, man, I would just not invest in that, right? That's not a thing that's going to get us breached. That is a thing that, I guess you're running metrics on just to make yourself feel good, right? And so
it's not practical.
It's not practical at all. Yeah. And so I get in trouble because I call them haha CISOs.
When I worked at my previous consultancy, I worked for Centercom in Wisconsin. Also do something very similar, by the way, to your full scale simulation of adversaries.
Nice.
But I went with them to RSA, and I was at the booth, talking to people and stuff like that. And I can't tell you how many times people came over and were like, "Wow, look at this guy. He's actually talking about hands-on attack vectors and stuff like that." And so on one of my breaks, I was kind of walking around and looking at some of the other places there, and there's just so many crapo products out there, man.
Oh yeah.
And it's and even if the product has merit, there's the people that are there, doing the talking and stuff like that. If you try to poke a little bit deeper at a technical level, it gets a little bit tricky. So it is definitely refreshing to see, someone technical in those positions. And I think it's also fairly rare as well, but I also feel like it's not as, after being in the bug bounty community, after going to the live hacking events, I also feel like it's not as rare as people make it out to be. Like, we're all hackers. We're doing our hackety thing. But, like, a decent amount of the people at the live hacking events are also, like, really cool and really eloquent and, like, really, like, well-spoken. And all of the, like, show and tells that happen are, like, really well done, most of the time.
Yep.
And so I think there's definitely some space for, hackers to be utilized in sales and marketing a little bit stronger. And I'm just, whether it aligns with their goals or not, or their desires or not, that's a different story. But the capability is definitely there, I think.
Yeah, I think that, I think specifically, Joel, on the questions, like, what specifically translated, it was more focus on, like, the technical bugs that I thought could lead to both breaches of private information and breaches from external internal. I really wanted that. Also, although it's a saturated market, I feel, because it all came from bug bounty, but having a risk register and an asset identification plan is really important to organizations. So, like, attack surface management and stuff like that, right? Like, if you think about, like, how much stuff gets found in the bug bounty scene because of Recon, and Recon came out of bug bounty, and now it's like this, multi-million-dollar industry that platforms are spawning up around. And so, like, I think that's important. Like, you can't defend what you don't know about in a security program. So, like, you have to have, some kind of centralized place. And so I'm a big fan there. Strict vulnerability management, I didn't think was as important until I married the two goals, right? Like, nothing's worse than just having a backlog full of bugs you're never going to fix, right? It has to be prioritized. It has to be clean. These are all things that you have to have a strong program around. Which bug bounty is a portion of finding vulnerabilities, right? So it fits in there under vulnerability management and operations, and then I think, I think just also, what else did I bring from my hacker life? I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so, like, we're all about the technical stuff here, and this is not one of the questions that we, I sent to you beforehand. So
no, it's
this
fine.
is like raw Jason Haddix stuff here. But like, for example, you said focusing on practices that are going to limit, personal information disclosure and stuff like that. So are we talking about, like, okay, we have to get rid of these numeric IDs and switch to UUIDs, or we have to install access control at like a middleware or something like that. I don't know, what the practices are, because once again, I'm a hacker, not a dev, but, like, we're talking about those sort of things, right?
Yeah. I mean, okay, well, I mean, the first thing that's going to reduce, like, anything at a security program when you drop in as a VCISO or CISO, right, is authentication changes, which is two-factor authentication. If you can get FIDO rolling, a number of breaches, I'm going to say 80% or more have some sort of credential reuse component to them these days. And so you focus hard on that. Although people love to hate an EDR, if you don't have an EDR strategy, you got to have some sort of EDR. And a lot of people hate on SIM too, but you got it. Like, there are table stakes for a security program. But when you come with an offensive mindset, yes, you get into the cloud world, you get into IAM for cloud, you get into configuration management for cloud, you get into, architecting systems where you're not doing access control badly, which means, like, mitigating a lot of IDOR type attacks. In a video game company specifically, we had to focus a lot on not leaking data that was pre-release or post-release, but private, that could help cheaters and stuff like that. So we focused a lot on cloud leaks and stuff like that. So
that's cool, man. And I appreciate giving that context, even though it's kind of a surprise question. And the technical pieces are always really, really, once you get your eyes on it, you start seeing the holes. But it's not necessarily like, Jason opens up his little book and he's like, all right, every numeric ID needs to be, You
got to take it piece by piece, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I wanted to dive in on some of the, like, Recon and asset discovery stuff you were talking about, but before we did that, I actually wanted to just ask about one thing that we had briefly talked about, which is the skill within sort of the hacker community, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like we're all hackers. I think we all know a ton of like really, really talented people from the bug bounty space, especially.
Yeah.
And having like transition from hacking to like full time, back to hacking and full time, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, do you have any tips on like how to hire some of those amazing talent sources? Like, how do you pull someone from bug bounty into the like corporate space? How do you get them to go full time?
Yeah, I mean, you got to give. So people who are full-time bug bounty, who are really, really good, sometimes come with personality, and so you've got to be a manager who can foster personality, I think, and let them kind of spread their wings. I won't say which job it was, but one of my jobs, right, like I am very ADD, and I will go off on like some project and dive really deep into it, and then but it might not be the thing I'm supposed to be doing at that time. And so people, one of the people at my work put up this sign in their office, and they said, "Let Jason be Jason." It was actually "Let jhaddix be jhaddix."
That's great. That's awesome.
And so you got to kind of treat people like that, right? Like, let them focus on, as long as they're bringing value with their focus, you got to let them, spread their wings. I mean, as far as monetary, right, it's really hard because some of those people, when they are ready to transition, they're looking at, I don't know if you guys talk about money on this podcast, but okay, yeah. I mean, you're looking at like a world-class bug bounty hunter is not going to take a job at a company for less than $250,000.
True.
And sometimes for some of the FANG companies or MAGA companies now, whatever they're called, that's $500K total package, and sometimes maybe even base, $450, and then total package is like $600, $700, $800, plus, you've got crazy bonuses every year. Yeah. They're just really expensive, some of the great talent. And so, like, if you're looking to bring in someone like that, but you're not one of those companies, you got to have an epic culture. You got to have interesting clients. You got to have an epic service, right, that allows them to learn and grow. You got to have leadership who understands them. That's kind of what I'm trying to build at Butterbot, right? Is like, hopefully I'll see some of the new up and coming, bug hunters come work for us and be offensive security engineers. And you got to offer stability too, right? Like, if you can't meet the package, well, what are things that you can do that can't meet a package of like a Google, right? And that is it's portions of culture. It's, like I did this whole talk on how to, but when we were in the great basically resignation phase last year, before we were into the great firing phase now, I did a talk at Black Hat at the CISO Summit, and it was like how to basically keep your employees in an ever competitive market. And, at Shadow Labs, we had this great program where we would induct people into Shadow Labs once a year at an awards ceremony. We'd give them all this badass swag, very similar to what HackerOne does at a live event. But it was exclusive. It was for your contribution to the team. We were doing Hack Fridays. We over-indexed on training each other and being like a family. And like, those are intangibles, right? Like, and they cost nearly nothing, honestly. Like, swag is a penny on the dollar compared to, anything. And
I'm
really
a sucker
having
for some swag, man.
right?
I'm not gonna lie. Like,
right?
I'm
like
repping the
right. I mean,
the HackerOne hoodie right now.
You see people walking around with BugCrowd or HackerOne hoodies, or people who work at really reputable shops, who do pen testing or whatever, and they have these brands, and you would be surprised at how powerful those brands are to make you feel included and like family and accepted, because we're all nerds, right? And we all have these small little quirks of like, like, am I good enough? We all have imposter syndrome. And so if you can cultivate that vibe, that family, cutting edge vibe, you can get some of those people against Google and Netflix and, those places and stuff like that.
Yeah, so. Man, I have to say, like, that rings so true for me. And I tell you, so I worked at Cinercom before, I mentioned them before, in Wisconsin. And like I said, it's a smaller consultancy, and I was making, a good amount for a junior pen tester, because they got me right out of college, right into there. And but my bug bounty income, quickly started surpassing that. Yeah. But I didn't leave for a while, and the reason why is just like it was just such a good community. It was such a great place to work, and like the people that I was around were awesome. And so at the end, when I did leave, the reason I left was because it was Mariah's dream, my wife's dream, to move to Japan, and I couldn't keep the same schedule, work schedule if I was in Japan. So I was like, all right, I'm going to pull the trigger and go. Yeah. But that was one of the hardest things I've ever done, man. Yep. Like, it was so hard leaving that company, and so, I think it's definitely possible, speaking from a full-time bug bounty perspective, if you can entice that, if you can show that amount of culture, that amount of, I don't know, there's just a good feel. I don't know how to describe it, but it's a good feel, then you can really pull the talent, for sure.
Yeah, so I pulled up some of the slides from the talk, right? So usually the things that are set in stone for a company trying to attract are base range, equity range, yearly bonus, and benefits. Those are kind of set in stone for the company. You know them before going into negotiation. But what are negotiated really is hiring bonus. So you can usually negotiate a higher hiring bonus for someone. PTO, right? Like PTO actually can be negotiated, right? Like how much actual time off do you get to cut off, a year? Work from home obviously is a big one nowadays, right? Like the promise to stay in your own space if you want to, 4-day work week is becoming more and more popular. Like, to have that 3-day weekend also is pretty baller. I've done it before where
it's big, man.
Yeah, you get to spend a lot more time with your family, like a bigger chunk with your family. Mm-hmm. And then like intrinsic is like how much travel training are you going to make people do? The idea of the 80-20 work project kind of cycle that Google does, right? 80% time on your job, 20% time of your time can be spent on building tools or contributing to the community in another way or learning. And then I'm just a big component of flex time, which a lot of people don't like, but a lot of like managing people don't like. But I like, as long as you're doing your work, if you ever call me and I'm your boss and you're like, hey, I'm gonna go to like do this cool thing that just came up, right? I'm like, yeah, go do it. Like, take the day off, take, tomorrow off or whatever, as long as we're getting our projects done and our deliverables done and you don't have like a thing. Like, I just consider that some nights I'm working until like 10 o'clock, because I'm in the zone. I'm going, and I don't want to stop working. And so people talk about this hustle and grind mentality, but I think of it more as like flexible time, right? Where you can put in, maybe 10 hours one day and then only put in 2 another day. And in actuality, tech workers work like that anyway. So just making it official is like, is such a relief for many people. They're just like, oh, Jason knows I want to go to this rave thing, and like I'm gonna be back in a couple days, and I'm not gonna have my phone on. He'll cover for me, and like, or something like that. And then mentorship is the last one I have on my list. Is just like strong mentorship. Like, Joel's on my team, and he wants to be the CISO level, right? Like, I am gonna meet with Joel every week and be like, where are we with your goals to get to this level that you want to get to? How can I help you? Where do I have feedback? And mentorship is really, really big. And the leaders spending time mentoring is really important. Like, you have to take the time out of your day to mentor people. Otherwise, they will become disconnected, basically.
Dang, man. That's gold. That
was like a little mini masterclass in how to be a good manager.
Yeah, that was fire, dude. I will say, one thing about the flex time really quick. I want to jump back to that. Like, I recently, so as a full-time bug bounty hunter, I've had a couple of my friends that are wanting to make the jump, hit me up and be like, hey, can we sit down and have a chat, and figure out whether this is a right fit for me? I was like, sure. So I get on a call with them. And one of the things, I talk to these people, like you said, salaries are pretty good in some of these companies, and you can make a chunk as a full-time bug bounty hunter if you're skilled, for sure. Even more so than probably what I would be getting in the industry right now if I went and worked as in just with my experience level and such like that. But the big thing for me is the flexibility, right? Yeah. And so I'm talking to these guys and I'm like, hey, what's the value add for going full-time bug bounty for you? So let's assume the money is roughly the same, for your first year. You haven't hit your stride as a full-time bug bounty hunter or whatever. Let's assume it's roughly the same. Why is this better than what you're currently doing? And the primary answer I get back is like, my workplace is fairly flexible. So if I say like, hey, I need to go run to a doctor's appointment, or I need to go, go on a walk with my kid or something like that. Like they're like, sure, go for it. But like, I have to check in, and like, like you said, making that sort of small flex things official as a part of the company, I think that would be huge, and I think that would allow them to retain talent, in these sort of situations. Because my friends are like, yeah, you know what, for me, if I want to just stand up and go get in my hot tub or go on a walk or something like that, I don't want to have to tell someone about that. Yeah. Or if I need to go, drop my lawnmower off at Home Depot to get fixed, very specific situation here. Then I don't want to have to check in with somebody to do it. I just want to do it, And I totally feel that. So making that more official, making that more as part of the company culture would be huge to retain talent, I think.
Awesome, cool. All right, well, that was a little bit of more of a tangent than I thought it was going to be. But
I
did
sorry.
Want to circle. No, it's totally fine because it was chock full of awesome information. I did want to circle back to the asset discovery stuff that you talked about, right? So obviously that's a huge part of the stuff that you've done, both from your history, the bug hunters methodology, all that kind of stuff. How much does your personal hunting and personal strategy shift away from the stuff that you've published and talked about? Is it basically just one-to-one with bug hunters methodology? Do you basically just throw your public word list on Ferrex Buster and go for it, or how does it work?
Sometimes I do. It really depends on the target, right? Some of the Recon methodology is totally invalidated if there's just one host in the bug bounty, right? It depends on what programs I'm invited to. I do prefer the larger Recon-y, friendly things, because I have a couple methods that are not published in my decks that still find me really good stuff, and all the public stuff still finds me stuff too. So I would say I'm a heavy Recon-based hunter, which I know is not popular these days, but that's okay. I just really find old shit that people leave on the internet. That's my skill. I don't know why. And I'm not telling everybody else that needs to be their skill set. And I still hack apps and all that stuff like that. But when I sit down to a program, right? Let's say this week is the HackerOne World Cup, right? And I'm on a team with Justin. And Joel, are you playing? Are you in the other team?
Yeah,
our team?
I'm on that one.
No,
we're all on the same channel. Okay, here, I was on vacation when you guys started, so I'm trying to do stuff, but it wasn't really I was still on vacation. So I'm gonna dive into it this week.
Who were traveling.
Yeah. Anyway, so when I looked at that list, I was all right, who's gonna have a lot of assets that I will be beneficial for, right? And so tonight I'm gonna fire up all my automation on my VPSs in my new Axiom setup, and I'll start doing Recon. And then, after I get done with Recon, I think people just make this jump, though, when I give those talks, especially the Recon one. They're Recon's going to find me bugs. And that's where it falls apart, right? Recon doesn't really find you bugs.
Preach, Jason.
Yeah,
Here we go.
So I use Recon, and I give all these esoteric methods of Recon, and I make a whole talk about Recon to find more apps to hack. Right. That is the point. Find more apps, because the more apps you find, the more of a chance you have to succeed in hacking, right? And so that has always been my thing, right? Give myself more at bats, if you're a baseball person or whatever, right? And so the Recon for me stops at subdomain enumeration usually, right? Every once in a while a nuclei template will hit and it's not a dupe. That's once every 6 months or something like that, right? I use it to find the subs, and then I do the application hacking. And then if you want to break Recon into kind of content discovery and stuff like that, I have word lists, my all.txt. I've been using 62Dez's new word list that kind of combines all the word lists I've seen before.
Oh, what is that? Hold on.
It's called All for One, I think. It's a word list.
Did you say the name was it 64?
64Dez. He's the guy who writes Recon for the Win.
Oh.
I will find it right now.
Yeah, if you could. Yeah. That sounds real interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so he does one called One List for All. That's his project.
One List for All.
Yeah. So he's the author of Recon for the Win, but he basically did what I did, but updated it, and what I did with the all list is basically I went back through the 15 years I've been hacking and found all of the tools that did content discovery, basically, file and directory brute forcing, and I just combined them into one word list. And yeah, there was a lot of trash in there, but it was full coverage of everything everybody had done research on for that topic of content discovery. So he did the same thing, and it's a huge list, but I mean, like, I find stuff with it all the time because it's agnostic to technology. And it includes a lot of legacy stuff, and I'm not. This is not a burn at anybody who's a younger tester, but you weren't around for if you're testing a legacy organization, right?
True.
And so that's why people are like, oh, why why does this hit? Why does it not hit anything for me? Well, if you're using it against like a cloud first organization, none of that shit in there is going to work, right? You need a better word list, and that's targeted towards that technology. But if you're targeting an older company, like my word list kills against Yahoo because they still have a lot of legacy tech, or like a Walmart or something like that. Like that word list has killed against Walmart, even though they suck sometimes.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. I've also had that experience. That's why I really like. You pointed out something really, really important there that I just wanted to re-highlight, which was like if you're throwing these lists at like an S3 bucket, you're not going to get anything. And so like you definitely got to keep an eye out on that and make sure you're not just wasting your CPU cycles there.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's one of the reasons I love Asset Notes word lists that they put out as well.
Yep.
Just like absolutely phenomenal.
Yep.
And the UI is pretty too.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Word list assetnote.io. So that's
they're the leaders in content discovery lists right now. Before them, we had SVN Digger and Git Digger, which was by some other consultancies, but they are the leader now, and long live Shubs, who is probably one of the smartest human beings and most compassionate men I've ever met in my life.
It's crazy, man. He's phenomenal.
Dude, I've had some legit mental health struggles in the last couple of years, and I've messaged Shubs just feeling like a freaking noob, and he has talked me down a couple times and just been like, yo, we're all like that, and
he's so good for that, man.
He's an amazing person. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
So
he's an amazing guy. He's been through like so many different things personally. He just has a lot of amazing insights on so many things.
I want to pull him on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I want to pull him on the podcast too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it'd be great to have him on here. I got to hit him up.
Yeah. Just make sure you explore more than the tech with him because he's got so many layers, right?
For
sure. Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of the time you end up using just sort of all.txt, do just literally like content discovery, find interesting targets, and then from there it's all like
web hacking.
Poke.
Yeah. If I could describe the rest of it, right? Like okay, so I'm in Burp. Everything is through Burp for me, right? I'm not one of the kind of guys who uses like dev tools. I find it too cluttered, so I mostly pipe everything through Burp. And then I'm just using the site like a normal user. If there's multiple roles, executing all the functions I can, making sure I hit the deep areas of like once a user logs in, their configurations or settings panels, any API integrations. And I talked about this in my newest Bug Hunters methodology. I got way more into the app hacking stuff, and so I look at those, and then I think about an application as its inputs, which I've kind of been trained as for many years, right? And so there are heat areas in an application. Anywhere that handles a URL or path, has the potential for certain classes of bugs. Any place that handles a reflected piece of text has possibilities for certain types of bugs. And so what I'll usually do is I'll look at the site tree, or I'll use Burp's dynamic analysis in Pro to look at all of the dynamic parameters, and I'll see what's there and what got passed to them, and then I'll start fiddling with them. And I have a checklist to make sure that I'm looking for all bug classes that relate to the types of inputs, so file uploads. And then I'll key in on things like JSON and XML response types, because those are usually associated to web services sometimes. And then I'll move into web hacking mode, or web service hacking mode, or API mode. And so, that's pretty much the regular type of AppSec bug hunter testing workflow, I think. I just have, 15 years of knowledge on, which I did that project of what parameters are most likely vulnerable to which things.
I love that.
And so that is one of my superpowers. Like I can look,
Hunt, right?
Yeah, Hunt, yeah, which has been ported to like several different tools now. But that has really helped me in my testing over the years. So
nice.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pull up Hunt really quickly, and I'm gonna put that in my notes, and then here it is. I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to go back and highlight, what you said before. The dynamic analysis piece that you reflected on, inside of Burp. I want to know how you did that. And then also, for the people listening, just kind of talking about methodology, you said, there are types of bug classes that appear when, URLs are being handled. There's types of bug classes that appear when content is being reflected. This is the sort of thing that you just kind of gain a sixth sense for when you're an experienced tester.
Yeah.
And so, like, I just wanted to go back and highlight those two things because, like, and I think, people ask me this all the time. Do you have like a checklist that you kind of go through and stuff like that? And for a long time, the bug bounty hunters methodology or the bug hunters methodology was that for me. And you've got some other stuff out there with checklists. And I think that's great. But as I have evolved as a hacker, and maybe this is different, and I know some people that do checklists and do it very well. But for me, it becomes more stuff like that. Like this. Okay, there is a URL being parsed here. There's a variety of weird things that can happen when a URL is being parsed. There's a variety of things that can happen when a regex is being used. There's a variety of weird things that can be happening when there's reflected content. And those sort of risk areas, if you guys can focus on those sort of things and gain a sense for like when pitfalls happen at a general level, I think that's going to really help people level up as hackers, because that's what gets you off the checklist and more thinking like as an attacker methodology, attacker mentality, going into the application, looking at it, feeling it. I always talk about feeling it, getting intimate with the application, understanding all the different pieces, the way data flows through it, and where the sketchy things happen.
And so here's the level up from that people eventually grow into. But and I saw you do it the other day. Someone put something in our hack channel for the competition. And you're like, well, they're using this language, so they're probably using this parser or this library, right? And so like people always talk about understand the technology, right? And so the maturation of a tester is, okay, I understand that this happening in the URL can be indicative of these bugs. And then the next level is like, oh, because they're using this coding language, or they're hosting it here, or I've done some research on the company or whatever, I know that they're using this stack, and this is the thing that's probably handling that URL. And here, now I'm going to go Google, hey, what have the bugs been in the past? Is there a way I can bypass this thing? Has there been pre-existing research, that'll help me in my exploitation of this type of bug, whether it's a URL parser or a file upload parser, or whatever. That's like the next step, is like being a technology specialist and being able to do that in a short time too, because like, you only have so long to hack an app if you're in a pen test or a bug bounty, right?
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the dynamic analysis piece, you said you were using Burp to figure out that. I'm not a Burp super pro. What are you using for that?
Let me see here. Let me pull up Burp real quick.
I know there's like reflected parameters.
So reflected parameters is it's not an extension. It's in the base policies now for Burp. So
nice.
So really, I don't ever think, honestly, and I'll just be totally honest about this, right? I don't ever think I'm going to do probably a better job than Burp's dynamic scanner with cross-site scripting. So I just have one policy in Burp that checks for cross-site scripting across the whole site, and I only run it on dynamic parameters, which I get by, I will tell you right now, right-clicking on the targets.
Yeah.
Okay. And you go, hold on.
Yeah, I wanna poke around at it and see, because there's like analyze target, which I don't use very often.
Yes, that's it. It's analyze target. Yeah, it's analyze target. So you right click on a host and you choose engagement tools, analyze target, and then you go to dynamic URLs, and that's everything that is past data against a site. And so that really trims down like all of the static content and everything, and that's kind of where I focus after I've done a full walkthrough of the app. Now, it doesn't always work, right? Like single page applications are not gonna, they're not gonna like work the same way. And, but for in general, most sites who pass data, via post requests will be there, and even get requests too, where it sees like larger payloads, or, larger URLs or parameters in the URL or things it thinks are REST parameters, it will count as dynamic. And so you look at dynamic URLs, and then you can check each dynamic URL for what params it sent, and you just start analyzing like that, basically.
Dude, that's gold, man. I always find new cool pieces of burp when I talk to, amazing testers that I respect, and yeah, it's so great to get everyone's way that they use this tool.
Yeah.
And and Kaido is going to be making, its own. There's going to be those same things in Kaido as well. There's a couple features that Kaido has already that I love that are not in burp. Particularly, I'll call this one out. I hate how in burp when you intercept, you have to click forward until you find the request you're looking for.
Yeah.
In Kaido, it queues them all up.
Okay.
And then you can just select
jump
the one you want and
that's
just
cool.
press forward. And
that's very cool.
Oh my gosh, it's just a game changer.
Yeah.
So,
a lot of the times I end up just, right clicking and say always accept from this host, because it's always like ad and analytics frameworks loading and like all kinds of like APIs that I'm not testing. But I end up having to do that process like 10 times, and I'm like, oh my god.
The one part I will say is you can do some adjustments on the interception side. So where it says like intercept these requests either from the client, like the requests or the responses, you can say it has to meet certain criteria. So I'll often say like it has to be within my defined scope.
Request intercept rules.
Yeah, and maybe I'll add like an extra condition, like it needs to match this path, or it needs to be on this host or something, so that it'll only I might have to click forward a couple times, but it'll be less than it would be like with all the tracking pixels and everything.
The thing for me with annoying. That is that like I've known about that trick for a while, and I use it. I literally am looking at it checked right now. The is in target scope request intercept rule. But the thing is, I do a lot of lately I've been doing a lot of client-side stuff, and sometimes I'll be, poking at how they interact with third-party libraries and what kind of stuff they're loading in and what kind of JavaScript they're trusting, to run on their page. And so sometimes I do want to intercept things that are outside of my scope, and so I uncheck it, and then I check it, and then I uncheck it, and I check it. And, Burp did a good job of, I think, putting that settings panel in a different window now with the latest version of Burp. So you can kind of keep it up and, on one of your monitors or something like that if you want to. But, still a pain point for me, I must say.
So the other part of the question, I think, was fuzzing. I think you were trying to get at, and so I have sec lists. I have a couple other fuzzing projects, like the awesome fuzzing project on GitHub. But web fuzzing is part of my workflow. So it's not just parameter analysis. And I have this thing that I remember in my head. It's sensitive secrets were leaked recently, and it's an acronym for how I basically think about when I fuzz with random data, either big payloads, small payloads, different type of attack payloads, as either a REST request or a parameter value request. I look at the status code, the size, the words line, and the return time, basically. And so in each of those, I'm looking for different things.
Say that one more time, and the acronym?
It's sensitive secrets were leaked recently. So status code.
I'll write it down. Sensitive secrets
were leaked recently.
Status code,
size, words, lines, return time.
Okay.
And so with status code, obviously you want to focus in on the app anytime you get a non-standard status code, right? And so you learn these as you test, right? You said it yourself, this is years of testing condensed into an acronym, right? But basically status code, any errors I want to over-index on to see how I caused that error with my fuzzing payloads and what payload was it. With my size, I want to see, you'll get non-standard return sizes, right? So you want to sort the column in Burp by return size of the binary payload of the return of the HTTP request. Lines also can be indicative if new content was loaded on the page while you were testing that maybe you got access to, especially error reports that leak credentials or things like that, like error messages that just dump on the screen and stuff. Return time shows, the indicativeness of a parser or something like that. Taking too much time to parse a file or a fuzzing payload you gave it, and then that's something you want to test for, DOS or application DOS or something like that, or a myriad of other bugs. But that's kind of how I look at all responses and analyze them when I'm doing actual fuzzing. So.
Dude, it's kind of crazy, man. I think one of the mistakes that I made earlier in my career was I was working with a lot of people that were older than me and that were my senior in organizations, and I found them not technical, and so I really just kind of dissed that. I was like, you know what, I'm the generation that understood. That I grew up with computers and stuff like that. And then I meet like a couple edge cases like you and Franz and people like that are just like, a little bit above me, but also like, in age-wise, but are just like have been doing the same thing for years and years and years. And then I just get like blown away by like, oh yeah, I've got this acronym that I just pulled off at the top of my head about how I, it's like, what the heck? Like, yeah. So, dude, it's such a pleasure to get you on here and talking about this stuff and see, what it can look like, as experience compounds, experience plus interest in bug bounty and hacking compound over time.
Yep.
Man, this is awesome.
And you can combine that with James Kettle's /powered scanner. Yeah. So that will do fuzz testing of all the special characters and then / escape them. And so you use that acronym sensitive secrets were leaked recently with that to kind of get custom fuzz cases for web applications.
That's awesome, dude. Yeah, I that's one of the areas that I think I need to progress in as a hacker is fuzzing and I'm finding this right now where at the target that I'm looking at for the World Cup, I'm trying to find. I've got a very specific narrow scope that I've locked myself down to, and I say I've got to find every single functionality that this website has. Yep. And for that, you've got to fuzz because you can pull GAU, you can pull anything, and like you're still not going to find the stuff that the very large percentage of stuff that somehow doesn't get put in archive or like virus total or whatever it pulls from. And so fuzzing is definitely an area that I would like to level up on.
Yep.
All right, Joel, we are at 1 hour 20 minutes. I could talk to Jason forever.
I mean, I got time if you guys want to do it. I mean, like
I think we may actually make this like a very long episode because I still got a couple other things. Cool. I want to hear about your reports for sure.
Yeah.
Joel, do you have anything you want to hit before we get to the reports?
Nah, nothing important. I feel like we've done a really good job of sort of covering like most of the questions that we had come up with in some pretty natural flow.
Think so too. Cool. All right. So, Jason, this is something we want to try to hit with people that come onto the podcast. One of the big things we do here is kind of talk about reports and like get in the weeds of technical vulnerabilities, which you just did a great job of doing. You've been doing a great job of doing both on the soft skills side and on the technical side, which is phenomenal. But yeah, I hit you up in advance, prepared some reports. So let's well, first, actually, let me ask this. Do you have a particular favorite bug type that you've got, or like, so some bug type where you're just like, oh, I love finding this? Like, anything that does that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I really like authorization bypass a lot. It's like one of my favorites. I don't know if it's the smirkiness of just having bypass logins. Like I don't know like what that is, but which usually comes through like different methods of content discovery, which a lot of people are like, oh, that's not hacking, but I mean, I sure as hell get access to accounts, so like
a lot
whatever.
Of stuff.
So
no, that's great, man. So so authorization bypass or authentication bypass. What is your in just we don't have to get too much into the weeds, but if you could just give us a little bit of a brief methodology for finding those that you kind of want to share, and go for it.
Yeah. So, so identifying how applications, I talked about this in my last talk, but how applications reference users in an application is really important, right? Whether it's a UUID or it's completely based on the session token and every request that you pass, but like invariably applications will add more functionality onto the app, which, sometimes they'll even create edge cases where they introduce a, UUID or something like that. Sure. And is it as simple as an email address that's representing a user, or is it, like a randomized token, or how random is the token? And so for authorization and authentication, I want to identify, like, what is it that's making me, right? And then I want to identify if there's multiple user levels in the account that have more power than me to do cool stuff that I can't do, right? So many applications have this nowadays. And so there's plenty of videos out there now, but I mean, until very recently there wasn't. And, using Authorize or Auth Matrix are two tools inside of Burp that I used to do manually, and I still honestly probably do more manually than I use the Burp plugins. But I create an Excel table, which I know is so ghetto, but I create an Excel table of everything I can do and every one of those dynamic functions in one account. And that I can do, and then I log out, and then I create another account or I just create another browser instance, and
sure.
I try to access the other user's session or basically areas. I try to substitute numerical IDs if I've referenced it's a numerical UUID. I try to do all kinds of trickery, and I spend about 2 hours probably doing that stuff between accounts. And then if I can get access to an administrator account, I try to make sure that both an unauth user and a regular user can't access the administrative function via just post requests and whatever else, API calls or whatever. And so really on the website and kind of the configuration panels and most app functions, it's getting better these days that these bugs don't exist as much as they used to. They used to be all over the place. I used to find them all the time. But now they've shifted to the API world where there's multiple user levels in the API world, and now it's just kind of shifted over to the API. And API developers are a new breed of younger developers who, unless they have a framework that's strictly telling them how to segregate user roles, they don't. And you get wrecked by by these types of bugs against APIs. So the other one I really like though is and this one I was really validated when I went to go actually see. Mark Litchfield doesn't hardly ever talk about his methodology except for when he used to have his site. But I went to a talk that he did at Tinder where I talked next or after him. And I was really validated because his whole talk was his approach to finding authorization bypass against big sites.
Man, what I wouldn't give to have seen that
talk.
It
was amazing because I was like, yes, I do this too. This is awesome. And so one of the stories I had was basically this company that had a bug bounty scope, and what they needed was a CRM for their business to integrate with their platform. And so what they did is I found out via press releases they bought another company. They acquired a CRM company, a small one, but an up-and-coming small CRM company. And they purchased it for use on them. And so the website was still up for the CRM software for the old company to run a demo. And so I had found the CRM instance that the new company had stood up, and basically they had branded it like they wanted to brand it, changed its name, but it was still the same software, and all I had access to was a login portal which I had no credentials to. And so what I did, and you should add this to your methodology, I think it happened in one of my talks, is I found the core software, and you can do this if it's open source code, but you can also do it if it's non-open source code, but they still have a demo portal available for the old site. And so I went to the old developer's website. I logged into their demo portal, which they gave away for free, to test the CRM, and I just mapped it in Burp. And then I exported all those URLs to a file and just replaced the domain for the new company without any authentication. And I started replaying the requests or the URLs and the endpoints against the new thing. And I found a couple paths where they had forgot to lock down permissions. One of them was this function in this app, in this CRM, that managed text message or SMS based message to their users. And so basically I had access to this control panel that had their API key for this text message service, and I could send text messages to over, I think there was 4 million clients already in the CRM.
Way.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I had that API key, and I could do that by just taking the API key and then using it directly with the service through like a curl request. And then so I kept looking, and I found some other places where it wasn't locked down. And I'm trying to remember. So I submitted that as a bug. That was a big one. And then I found a verbatim API that they had set up, and I had some predefined paths for the API, which was a user access. It was an API call to basically deliver your profile settings. But like many APIs do, they'll give you back everything, but it had a user variable in the URL, and it was a numeric variable, and they just hadn't made it unique at all. It was like 6 characters or something like that.
No.
And so I brute forced that path, and I had the one from the old website, so I knew it was 6 characters. And so I brute forced that path to 7 characters, I think, in Burp. And eventually I hit one of the admins of the application's profile setting API endpoint, and that returned his password, a verbatim password.
my gosh.
And so then I logged into the application on their side, and I had access to this CRM was crazy. Like the amount of information it had, like, was nuts. This company is huge. They're worldwide brand. And so, I mean, and then I just wrote up the most amazing finding you can think of. I'm like, with this access, I can basically do anything. I was like, I'll push text messages and JavaScript into your app to take over all their users' phones. Like, I made a little proof of. I was like, so this customer is notorious for like prove the impact, and I was like, I am writing a report that absolutely shows what I could do as a malicious person here.
Just so you know, there is impact.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
there is not any lack of impact.
Yeah, exactly. So the trick there is like basically, you know, when you're testing and you're testing against a COTS, I call it common off-the-shelf software, whether it's open source or it's had a demo at some point. Install it yourself.
Awesome acronyms.
Oh, thanks. Dude, COTS is actually an industry one, so
okay, is it?
Yeah,
okay, good,
COTS
good,
software, yeah. So, you know, whether you purchase it or whether it's open source or whether it was closed sourced as a SaaS, try to get access to the software, install it yourself, dump all of the endpoints and parameters that you can from your install or from the live running demo or whatever, and then replay those against the site. And I have hit that so many times against bug bounties for authorization issues.
Dude, it's crazy. Like, it's so funny you mentioned this because we're all in this, you know, HackerOne World Cup thing.
Yeah.
And I've got a guy right now that I'm working with on our team that he's like, oh, this host is kind of interesting, right? And I look at it, and I literally did that exact same thing. Like, I went to the website. There was a demo portal. You could log in with default credentials. You know, you get in there. You figure out how the app is structured. You pull all the routes. You try to hit those routes on the actual website.
Yeah.
And dude, that's such a gold technique. It's landed me so many bugs. And then, you know, what we did is there's also, you know, you can buy the software for pretty cheap.
Yeah.
So we just, you know, paid the money, you know, got the software and pull it down and just start reading through, getting access to source code. And when you've got access to source code, the game gets so much easier.
Oh, yeah,
because
for sure.
you can start, you know, even if you're just grepping off of keywords or anything like that, you know, it's a big difference. So big second to that tip. That's a great one, Jason.
So the follow-up on that is that so this is one not a lot of people know, and I'll let it go on the podcast. So
hell yeah, here we go.
Is that many of those paid software that you don't want to pay for that are made by big companies, like maybe that, you know, rhyme with Boracle or something like that. I don't know, like
the most boring company out there.
Many developers develop their environments in Docker, and then they upload a Docker file of the installed software to Docker Hub or another service like Docker Hub, and you can pull down.
How Shubs and I popped a bug
this
on.
Is literally
okay.
all the time. Dude.
Okay,
yeah,
sorry, I'm releasing your guys' secrets here, but
shut up, Jason.
Sorry, no, so you download that Docker Hub and you host it yourself, and now you have access to source code review, which gives you a heads up against many things. So,
and I talked about this at my DEF CON talk this past year as well. It's like, you know, it was Sam Erb that I was working on a program with, and he did this exact same thing. Went down, pulled the Docker down. You know, you didn't even have to pay for the software because the Dockerized version, you know, it requires you to put in a license key or whatever, but you can just pop in there and grab all the, you know, source code and stuff like that. So that's a big. That's a big one. A big win for sure that people should be on the lookout for.
Yeah. So I had one other one that was more just fun than really technical, but I pulled it because a lot of mine, a lot of my best hacks I post on Twitter as threads. And I obviously obfuscate all the names and everything like that, but I think they're fun to read for people. And so some of my good ones I've already had. I wanted to bring you guys that weren't on the web yet that eventually I will turn into threads, but they're not there yet. So this one was a major auto manufacturer. That's what I will say.
Okay.
And it wasn't in the last big batch of Sam's research with Nahamsek and and Zayat and everybody, but it was in kind of a previous generation of car hacking. And so this one was actually Recon based. So I had started basically looking at the site, and one of the things I like to do is I call it what the hell do I call it? I put it in one of my talks, but it's like recursive recon or whatever. Basically, you load up your site in Burp, and you set up a keyword in your site, in your scope settings that says to allow scope with the keyword in it of the company. So not a domain. So not like, not Tesla.com, but just the word Tesla, right? You want to see
exactly
everything.
How I do my scope setup.
Oh, okay,
I
cool.
just do
Very
objects,
cool. Yeah,
and
yeah,
I just
exactly.
Put like
yeah.
company word or like
Yep.
key phrase.
Yep,
So I catch,
exactly.
like,
Yep.
more domains.
Yep. So that's what I do, and then I recursively spider all those sites. So I'll spider everything that comes up in me browsing the site, and then I'll select everything and spider it again, and then I'll just do it until there's no more sites basically that are cross-linked between everything. And so it gives me a pretty good feel of everything that has that keyword in it. And so I end up getting all of these weird top level or domains, not subdomains, but domains that I have never seen before that have the keyword in them. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I was doing this for a big auto manufacturer, and I found this domain that was like random 4-letter words. I'm sure they're abbreviation for something, and then the keyword. And I'm like, that domain seems interesting. So I go looking at that domain, and it's basically just a blank white page, right? And like, I'm like, okay, that's weird, like whatever. So I start doing content discovery on this blank white page, right? Which is kind of what I do because there's nothing else to do there, right? Like there's no content, right? So it's like whatever. So I start doing content discovery, and I start getting hits back for paths for Jenkins and for some other CI/CD tools, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I start loading up my browser. And so the story behind this is it's not that fancy, right? I did content discovery. I basically walked into an unsecured Jenkins install.
Oh my gosh.
I basically walked into what else? They had Sonatype Nexus running up there. It was all
source code.
Yeah, all source code. Yeah, all source code for the organization. Like all of their infotainment source code. It was nuts. But
That's awesome.
The story is that I found out from a person that works there after I submitted the bug bounty thing, and he's like, I got to tell you the story about this thing. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, we have been telling our developer staff that they can't move to modern CI/CD tools for the longest time because we're in waterfall and like we're an old car company and like we're just not going to, move yet. We are eventually, but we're not yet. The development team by themselves purchased a domain and started using the CI/CD tools that they wanted without telling the organization.
What?
So the org had no idea this whole domain was public to the internet, and it had all of this source code in it, and they had just gone rogue basically because the org wouldn't let them.
Getting fired.
Yeah,
Jeez.
right. And so I wrote up like a pretty exhaustive finding. I had so many hard-coded credentials in the source. I had like access to everything. I could shell the domain or the server that Jenkins was on because it had the script console thing where you can run jobs, and that's a common red teamer tactic. But yeah, I mean, there's like 4 different source code tools on there. I think it was Sonatype Nexus, Jenkins, TeamForge was on there. And some other stuff too, and yeah, but I just thought it was super funny that like the dev team had just gone rogue and started using all these tools.
Crazy,
like a security team's nightmare.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely security team's nightmare. Yeah, but I thought that was
crazy.
a funny
and
one.
And it's crazy, that we see that sort of stuff from time to time too.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
That absolutely does happen, and it's a different world, the dev world and the security world. So sometimes when you're dealing with the bureaucracy, who knows? Someone might just go around it.
Yeah, the other one that's similar to that is I was on a bounty and I found a red team infrastructure for their GoFish instance, and so I found it on the internet and I was doing Recon and I'm like, what is this domain that looks kind of like the other domains but is coming up? And they had cross-linked it somewhere that I had hit on it and it showed up in Burp, and like I was like, weird, and then I go to it and it's like a GoFish install. And default, like I had a pretty default credential, like admin or something like that. And I log into their GoFish instance, and I'm like, "Is this a finding? Like, if I found your red team's like GoFish instance, like,
holy crap!"
Dude. It was super funny. And my friend works on that red team, and he's like, "Bro, you just burnt our domain." And I'm like, "Oh no!
What are you doing, man?
Yeah.
That's dirty, bro.
I know.
You can't do that." And
I know.
I feel that all the time, though, man.
Yeah.
Like I well, I won't share too much details, but I have been convicted in the past of like, I'm writing this code right now. This is shit code, and like I know it, but I'm gonna write it anyway. But I know it, so like that's the difference.
I'm acknowledging it.
That's the difference between me and the devs. Is I know I'm making a dumb mistake.
Yeah, and I think the last one was one that I did do a thread on, but it was the password manager that we hacked. Yeah. So this was back in my early pen test days, and there were multiple players in the password, kind of LastPass. There was several back then that were trying to win the space. And so basically we were on this call, and at that time it was my salesperson, Deanna, who was the nicest person in the world. She set up this call with this company. They contacted us, actually, and they were abusive to her on the phone. Like, basically, like, just jerks. They're like, like, I don't even know why we're talking to your company. We wouldn't have to do this unless we were compliance. We're one of the best dev teams in the world. Like, your team's not going to find anything. Like, they gave her a hassle about, like, pricing and communication, cadence, and she was awesome. She was, like, the coolest person at the company, honestly.
Dang.
And so she came to us, the engineering team, of, normally the project is only supposed to be applied to one of us for a web teast, right? And she's like, can you guys wreck this company?
Oh my
and I was, and we were like,
exactly what I was hoping
yeah,
for.
and we were like, yes, Deanna, we will do that for you. And so it was,
well, if you insist.
yeah. And maybe it was a tactic of theirs to try to piss us off to get better testing, but they got good testing. So,
oh my gosh.
So I had spent a week doing Recon, and I was getting, like, not Recon, but like, basically application profiling, and I hadn't really found too much yet. They managed their password manager via bookmarklet and, or an extension, and it was pretty much the same. They had a public facing website, with standard functionality, that would log you into, like, your vault, that would pull things from, that would interact with the extension. And, so, like, this is very early on in my web testing, so I did content discovery with, back then it was Durbuster. And so I had found a whole bunch of paths that were giving me 403s and other error codes that were not standard. One of them was like Gmail PHP. One of them was PHP MyAdmin, but they were locked down, right? I couldn't get to them. And
keywords that are really taking me back.
PHP MyAdmin, right? It's old. This one's old. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, actually, PHP MyAdmin was not locked down. It just was a login screen though, and I didn't have credentials for it. And so, what we ended up doing is the fuzzing methodology that I've been doing for years, right? Is I just started fuzzing every dynamic parameter, and at one point I hit a minifier parameter. And it started giving weird error messages, and I found that out through the word count, basically. And so I was like, this is weird. So I went to my buddy Paul, who was much smarter than me at the time in web testing, and I was like, hey, we might want to look at this, and also we're getting at the end of our testing window, and let's just dive into this. And he's like, okay. So we're all doing different parts, and we had all discovered like some paths, but nothing really critical. And so by fuzzing this minify function, we were noticing that it was giving us error codes that said like incorrect pathing or something like that. And we were like, that's weird. It's referencing pathing. Maybe we can pop an LFI here. But we couldn't get it. So we spent 3 days playing with this error code. And then, we did the standard investigation. Okay, well, what are they coding the front end in? And it was like code igniter, basically. And we were like, okay, so let's look through the code igniter documentation, and we found this small reference in the code igniter documentation, I think it was, that sometimes you can change the dots in a path reference to underscores to work better with the web, basically, for some reason. And so we replaced the dots with underscores in our LFI path, and we're able to echo out files from the web server.
Dude.
Yep. So then we go through every page that we had found, echo out the source code for all the pages. The web root was pretty standard.
You're going in now.
Yeah. So, and then eventually we go to the content discovery we had done, and we start echoing out those pages that we had found via the content. So gmail.php echoed out an integration script for the main developer of the site that had his personal Gmail credentials in the integration script. And so then we log into his personal Gmail, of which he has source code in his Google Drive, basically.
Oh my god.
In his Google Drive. And so we're like messing around in there. And then we were able to eventually get a credential from his Google Drive that logged us into PHP MyAdmin. And then we got into PHP MyAdmin. We added our own super user accounts via injecting a hash directly into the database through PHP MyAdmin. And then what else did we do?
Dude, I love this so much.
Yeah,
this is just like
this is like what Red Team
clutch.
Dreams are made of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wake up. Huh.
Yeah, it was, and I mean, we did some other stuff too. Like, eventually, we backdoored the plugin, a version of the plugin, not the production live one, but we said, here's what we could have done. We could have backdoored the plugin and or the extension and pulled everybody's passwords as they were making them. We found cross-site scripting once we had access to Circuit. Oh, that's what we did. So once we had the LFI, not only did we pull down the pages we knew existed for the website, but we installed, like I said, this is part of the methodology. We installed CodeIgniter, a CodeIgniter base install on one of our servers, and then took out all the paths and files that we saw from that as a list, and then ran it through the LFI. And through that, we got API keys that they had hard-coded in source code, and we had so much information, and it was great. We had completely owned them by the end, and we went on this call on the kickoff call, and they were like so confident that we weren't going to find anything, and so we start going through the report how we had just wrecked them, and they were like. They were just dumbfounded. We logged into your
personal Gmail.
Yeah. We have screenshots.
Yeah.
We have screenshots of the dude's personal email. People are G-chatting him, and we're like, yeah, this is us, like in your email, and so that was one of the more satisfying ones of my career,
gosh,
and it took a village. It took all four of us, at the end, but it was so fun.
You really defended your salesperson there.
Yeah,
that's
so awesome.
Yeah,
dude, that's awesome to hear. And I don't know. When I was in consulting, I definitely liked working with the people that were more like, all right, let's work together on this.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Get value out of this.
Yeah.
But there is definitely those moments where the people are like, if you find anything, let us know.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, let's go.
It's like a hacker challenge. You're like, let's go. All right, yeah.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
We're at an hour 45.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, guys.
No, Jason.
This is awesome.
Yeah, it's phenomenal content. Wouldn't trade it for the world. Let's wrap it up, though. Jason, is there any? You already shouted out Butterbot, quite extensively.
Yeah,
awesome product there. But anything else you want us to, you want to shout out here at the end?
No, I'm super glad you guys are doing this podcast. I think that we need more bug bounty type stuff. I don't know. I think bug bounty hunters are no different than any other security testers, right? So I actually don't think of this as a bug bounty podcast. I think of you guys as like an AppSec or a testing podcast, right? And so we just need more of it out there, people talking about stuff, especially people who are familiar with new school development and cloud and stuff like that. So I'm just really happy that I got a chance to come on and talk to you guys, and really appreciate it. And if you're out there and you're hacking, just keep hacking, keep at it.
Yeah, keep at it. For sure.
Yeah,
all right.
Awesome. Yeah, you can find J Haddix on Twitter.
At J Haddix,
Yeah, J Haddix most places. And,
yep.
Dude, this was an awesome conversation. Thanks so much.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. That's the pod.
Sweet. See ya.
Cool.